Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and this is going to be our patch 9.11 support tier list. So, as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It's free, it's easy, just takes a couple of clicks. Really helps out a ton with visibility on the channel. Check out the rest of the content as well. We stream every night starting around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube. It's a wonderful, very friendly, chill community. We'd love to have you. I try to be as interactive as possible with the chats. I'll answer any questions that you have. And check out the rest of the content as well. This is the support tier list, but I'm also going to release an AD carry tier list and a jungle tier list for this patch as well. I might also do mid and top lane. And we offer coaching sessions on the channel. All of those are in a playlist. We've got about 180 coaching sessions if you want to watch some of that. Topical guides and much, much more. So check it out on the main page, The Strategy Professor at YouTube. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. Now, for this patch list, I'm going to try to do this a bit faster. I know it's kind of a meme on the channel, me doing anything fast. But I went ahead and did away with the kind of meta section that I had at the beginning. It's interesting, but usually it just kind of overlaps with what I talk about with the supports anyway. So just to save some time, I went ahead and cut that section. We're just going to get right in the chase here and just start talking about the picks. So my top 10 picks are Nami, Sona, Nautilus, Janna, Zyra for tier 1, and then tier 2, Yuumi, Rakan, Lux, Soraka, and Pyke. And then we'll talk a little bit about tier 3 as well. Leona, Thresh, excuse me, Lulu, Morgana, and Braum. But we're going to focus mostly on the top 10 here. And as always, just remember that these are just guidelines for a tier list. You can watch 5 different tier lists, and they'll have 5 different orders for the champions. And I encourage you to look at other content creators too, just to kind of see, where they stack things up. But I try to give you the most sort of in-depth explanations for why I put the champions where I put them. But then also keep in mind that this is primarily for sort of a plat minus audience, usually somewhere between like silver, gold, platinum, but it definitely can apply to higher elos to an extent as well as, if you're in iron and bronze. I think a lot of this stuff can be very useful also. And remember that this is also just for a generalist audience. This is for the 1,000+ people that'll probably end up watching this video by the end. So I'm not specifically talking to you, as an individual person watching this video, right? This isn't an individualized coaching session or an op.gg review, which I do offer both of those. But this is for a larger audience. So yes, if you are extremely good on something like Lux or Yuumi or Rakan, could they be tier 1? Absolutely, right? But we're looking for Pyke or anything like that, Thresh. But we're looking for consistency here. How well will these champions perform over large populations of people trying to play these champions that have a moderate amount of practice on them at sort of an average elo in League of Legends, right? So that's primarily what we're looking at. We're not looking at one tricks. We're not looking at the overall potential of a champion, although that does come into play. We're looking at how likely is it someone can actually perform well on that champion. Hey, thanks, Tyler, for the sub. I appreciate it. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So I think Nami is going to be number 1. I moved her up a little bit. She's been in the top, the tier 1 for a while. And realistically, if something's number 1, number 2, number 3, a lot of that's interchangeable depending on matchup and depending on, expertise with the champion. Right. But I do like Nami. She's just a very safe pick in a lot of situations. She can adopt to a bunch of different game states. So she does have really nice CC. She's got her bubble. She has a slow with her tide caller. She has a another knock up and slow with her tidal wave. So she just performs really well with a lot of different champions out there. Has pretty good scaling as well. She's one of the lower scaling enchanters. She's going to get outscaled by Sona, by Soraka, by Janna to an extent, but at the same time, she still scales pretty well, and she has a lot of utility. So you're sacrificing some of that late game, just raw healing and shielding power in exchange for having a lot more CC and having higher range than a lot of those other champions as well. So she can heal from 725 back, which is really far. Janna's shield is 800, but something like Soraka is only going to reach 450. Sona with her auras has to be within about 450 range. So she has really nice ranges on that. She has great all-in potential, which is something a lot of enchanters do not have. If she lands that bubble in the laning phase, it's highly likely you're going to be able to force summoners or maybe even kill somebody if they're too late. Because if you bubble, W them, walk up, auto, ignite, and your AD carry has any kind of pulse at all, they're going to be losing that trade really badly. So you do have the potential to make some really big plays. And remember that this bubble can hit multiple people too. Like later on in team fights, you can get a double or even a triple bubble sometimes, and the same is true with Tidal Wave. So it's not only CCing one person, but it can CC multiple people. And when there are a lot of champions out there that are coming back into the meta with a lot of CC that are very good at team fighting, particularly junglers. So if you're looking at things like a Mumu, who's been very popular, he was nerfed on this patch a little bit, but I still think he'll be really good. Looking at things like Sejuani, Zac just got buffed tremendously. I expect to see a lot more Zac. These type of champions are definitely coming back, and she performs very well with them because she can chain that CC together. To sort of outperform. Also a very good Ardent Sensor user and an Airy abuser because her E can apply Airy, her W bounces around and can apply Airy to multiple targets. So she's got a lot of stuff going on for her. She's really good jack of all trades. She's one of the better enchanters against all-in champs like Nautilus, like Leona, like Pyke, who are becoming popular because she can stand so far back. And when they engage, she can CC and disengage with her Aqua Prison and her Tidal Wave. So she's still not like insanely amazing against things like Nautilus, but I think that she's a lot less weak against them than something like a Soraka or a Sona. She has some counterplay to help peel yourself, to keep yourself a bit safer, but then also to keep your ally a bit safer so they might actually survive if Nautilus lands a hook. They're still going to be in big trouble, but I think that they have a better chance of surviving with her than they would with something like a Soraka or a Sona. Janna's pretty good at peeling as well, but Janna lacks the same kind of aggression that Nami has in the early game. And Nami's just very consistent as well. You just walk up, W them, auto attack, boom, that's a trade. With Airy and Scorch, it's really simple to do. You can do it through minions. It's guaranteed. You can't miss it, and it does damage to them and heals you in one spell. So she's probably the best laning enchanter out there, I think, because if you think of something like Sona, her heal is very expensive early on. Her W, it's very inefficient unless both people are injured and are actively in combat. If you think of something like Soraka, you have to actually land your Qs, which can be tricky, especially as you start getting into gold and platinum when people know what you're trying to do when you walk up with Soraka and they can maybe dodge your Q. So there's just a lot less counterplay to Nami than there are to other champions. You're guaranteed you're going to get that harassment off, and you're going to have reasonable scaling and reasonable CC as the game goes on. So I think that makes her one of the best all-around blind pick champions out there, and she's pretty easy to use. She's not as easy as someone like Sona, but for someone who has that much CC, I think she's very forgiving with a lot of her mechanics. Okay, so Nami's going to be fantastic on this patch. So I recommend Airy, Mana Flow, Absolute Focus, Scorch, and then Footwear and Biscuits. I have tried the Poro and Relentless Hunter. It's good. It takes a while to scale up. I really like having these biscuits in the lane. It just allows you to be a lot more aggressive, especially in the early game with your mana before you get too many Fairy Charms on your first or second back. That can be really, really good. Can allow you to really keep the pressure up. And then Footwear is still good. It does take longer to come online, but it does also save you money down the line from having to buy those boots. So I think that is really handy. Although, if you think that the game is going to go long, if you're going to have time to scale up, and get your Poro and your Relentless Hunter, then those can be some decent options as well. Then I recommend Mobility Boots. Just helps you get around the map, rotate, get to the situation where you need to get to, drop those wards, get back into the lane, lose less experience. Mobility Boots, really, like, the biggest thing that people underestimate about them is that it's a direct buff to your experience. Like, you're going to gain an extra level in the mid game off of these boots, because when you have to go ward or whenever you have to go back to get more wards or whatever, you spend a lot of time running around as support. And so those mobility boots allow you to get to the place where you need to be and allow you to stay in lanes longer to get more experience. So, when you get back to lane 5 seconds faster because you have mobility boots, when you do that over and over and over again over, 6 or 7 backs, in 20 minutes, then that really adds up, right? That's like an extra, 30 seconds to 1 minute that you're in the lane getting experience. That's a wave or two extra of experience that you're getting. And that's just a really simple example. A bigger more game-breaking thing can be if you show up to the team fight 3 seconds faster than the enemy support, that could be a complete game changer. You could win the entire fight because you're there faster. So I think that they are really good. Ionian Boots are also worth considering, but she doesn't really abuse her summoners as much as some of the other champs we're going to talk about. So you're really just doing it for the CDR, and, it's okay on her. It's all right, but I just think that having that extra movement speed is going to be bigger. Then you want to do Athene. She's a great Athene's abuser. She does a lot of damage in the early game, allows you to stack up even more healing. Athene's allows you to get an Amp Tome and get mana regen, which you want. And Chalice of Harmony is fantastic and really underrated in the lane. It gives you a lot of extra sustain. While you're getting that mana regen, you're also getting health regen. And it scales really well with later items. Every time you buy a Fairy Charm, you get double value on it, because you're getting 5 AP in addition to the 25% mana regen. And so you're spending 125 to basically get 250 gold worth of value every time you get a fairy charm. And guess what? All of your other items have a lot of fairy charms in them, so including Frostfang. So you're getting a whole lot of value out of that item. So I recommend going Athene's first. If your 80 carries really far ahead, you could consider Ardent Censer first. And Redemption, I wouldn't get it first in most circumstances, but you could get it second. So these are the 3 items you want, but the order kind of depends on the matchup. I think Athene's is the most well-rounded. You could do Ardent if you're ahead. But then, kind of just get a read on how well is your 80 carry doing, how well can different people on your team use Ardent Censer. If there's a lot of people that can use it well, like you've got a Kindred jungle, or you've got a top lane Yasuo, or a mid lane Irelia, or something like that, maybe get that Ardent first or second. But if you've got something like a Jen on your team, or a Miss Fortune who doesn't use it that well, and you've got a bunch of mages and tanks and stuff, then maybe consider getting Redemption as a second item instead of Ardent Censer. So you kind of have to feel out what's going on in the game, but those are the 3 items overall that you want to get on her. Okay, next up on the list, we have Sona. This should come to a surprise to nobody. She's really overpowered, especially if you're an Iron or Bronze. I think that Sona is the best support by far because she's so consistent. You really can't mess her up. It's hard. I mean, if you get caught and die, hey, Rory, what's going on? Did you get the little foot thing for you? Look what I've got. You got Elmo? You hanging out? My wife popped over to the store real quick, so Rory might be running in and out here. I think she's just checking to see what we're doing in here. But I really need to get this video done because we're going to hang out with some friends later tonight, and I know people want this video. So we're kind of multitasking here. So she might pop her head in every now and then. She's just watching some Sesame Street in the next room over. But anyways, yeah, I mean, everyone's very familiar with her. She scales like a maniac. She has just really, really high scaling with plus healing and shielding and AP. But do not get Archangels and Lichbane on her. I've got an entire video about this. Just watch my Sona Taric video. I explain why with the Sona Taric bot lane combo, it is good to get AP because you have cash flow. You are getting minions. You are getting gold. But when you're balling on a budget, when you're not getting on a CS, it's much, much, much more efficient to get your support items, right? Like the Athenes and Ardent Censer. And remember, those give you AP. They're very efficient uses of AP that also benefit your team. Athene, and I'm not going to go into the whole thing. I have a whole video that talks about Ardent Censer and Athenes as well. Check that out, the 12 most misunderstood items in League of Legends, and that's under my topical guide section where I explain all the math behind it. But basically, Athenes ends up giving you somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 50% plus healing and shielding if you're a champion that does consistent damage like a Nami, like a Sona. But it also ends up giving you a lot of AP. Just the base AP on that item is 50. And if you end up getting those core items that we talked about before, Frostfang, Athenes, Ardent Censer, Redemption, in the late game, it gives you 90 AP. 90 AP. That's almost the same thing as a lot of these AP items. Like, it's going to give you the same AP as something like Archangels or something like Ludens. It's all going to be in the same ballpark of AP, but it's much cheaper. It's only 2,100 gold instead of 3,000 gold. And it's going to give you so much extra plus healing and shielding. 30% plus healing and shielding is worth a lot. Plus healing and shielding is valued at like 35 each. It's close to 1,000. So if you have 35 times 35, it's 1,200 gold worth of value. So you're just getting a tremendous amount of value. Oh, she brought us some air filters. Look at that. Isn't that awesome? She brought us some air filters, and now she's got our car keys, and she's going to honk the car door. But trust me, it's way, way more efficient just to go Athenes and just to go Ardent Censer. You're not powering down. You're powering up. You're not, taking a passive role and not being active. You're actually carrying because you are creating more kills. I mean, the best, because I explain this on stream all the time. People are like, why don't you build full AP on Lux? Why don't you build full AP on, Sona or something like that? Why is it bad? Because, the easiest way, the simplest way to think of it is kills, right? When you see a lot of kills, that means that someone's powerful. That's one of the easiest things to understand in League of Legends, right? One team, the score is like 30. The other team, the score is 3. You're like, damn, that team's getting blown out because there's a lot of kills. But why is that? Why do kills matter? Gold. That's why it matters, okay? So when you get something like an Athene's Unholy Grail that's going to be like 200% cost efficient, and you're buying it for 2,100 gold, that means you're getting a free 2,100 gold just out of nowhere. You're giving your team 2,100 gold worth of value because you're buying an item that is super efficient. for the kind of champion that you have and the kind of items that you're going to use. Okay, so that's like a kill is worth 300 gold, right, on average, right, not including bounties and things like that. So that means you're giving your team 7 kills. Okay, so whenever you purchase something like an Athene's, instead of something like an Archangel's or a Luden's, you're giving your team 7 extra kills. So, you know, the score might have been 10-10. Now it's 17-10. Just think about that you just heard, like, pentakill and then double kill at the same time on the screen in green all across your screen. Because that's what happens when you buy those items. So that's the best way I can explain it to people, is that it's the equivalent of giving your team an extra 7 kills. Now, you might say, well, if it's that good, why don't mid laners do it? Because the big ticket items scale really well with other big ticket items, right? Lich Bane works extremely well when you have a lot of AP, when you have a death cap, when you have, you know, a fully stacked Seraph that works really good. Seraphs works really good when you have a lot of other AP items to go with it. When you have spell penetration to go with it. You know, when you have all of these other items together, yes, it's way, way stronger. But when you're on a budget, then something like Athene's and Ardent Censer is going to be far, far better. Okay, so trust me on that. I know it's a little difficult to understand because everyone thinks high damage is what wins the games, but you are still getting high damage. You're still getting a lot of AP, and you're contributing a lot of damage as well. Ardent Censer is the same thing. Ardent Censer is even more efficient. Ardent Censer is 200 to 300% efficient. It depends on how many people really benefit from it, how many people have a lot of attack speed, and, you know, are going to benefit from that buff. But by and large, it's 200 to 300% efficient. It's really, really good. So go watch my video if you want more details about that. But that's my one thing I will tell you about pretty much every support that's got some kind of AP that's not named Zyra or Brand or something like that, who benefits heavily from Spell Pen. That's a different thing we'll talk about here in a second, because they have super high base damages. Pretty much everybody, if they have a heal and a shield, they're going to want to go Athene's. They're going to want to go Ardent Censer, okay? So even if you're really fed, I still would not go for those types of other items. Like, yes, if you're at 6 items and you have 5,000 gold sitting around your bank, yes, you can sell one of those items and get a death cap, okay? So there are some extreme cases, but by and large, most of the time, you're going to want to get the 2,100 to 2,300 AP support items because they're just more cost efficient. Okay, so yeah, I mean, Hymn of Valor ends up giving you just a ton of extra damage. I mean, that's 320 damage with a 1.0 AP ratio is just insane. This ends up, you know, in a team fight, if you have 1 or 2 items, giving you over 1,000 value worth of shielding and healing, you know, once every 4 seconds or so. So it's just tremendous numbers. Her big problem is if she gets caught, she's going to die. She has virtually no peel outside of her ult. She can zip around with her E and kind of rotate quickly around the map, but that's not going to help you that often in combat. So if you can be safe, if you can push up, if they have a scaling jungler, you know, they got, I don't know, a Warwick or something like that that's just going to farm to 6 most likely, then she can be very, very good. So she is oppressive in lane. She does outscale pretty much every other enchanter in the game, but she's very, very unsafe. She is consistent, though. You can very consistently proc Scorch and Airy and all of that stuff with your Q, even from like 1,000 range, 825 range. So sometimes, even if you can't get your auto attack in, even if it's scary to walk up and auto attack that Leona, which you should be scared of that, you can still use your Q to at least farm up your Frostfang so you get your wards quickly and apply a little bit of poke with the Airy, with the Scorch. So she's fantastic. Right now, highest win rate support also. Look at win rate. Win rates don't always say everything, but it's a pretty big indicator that it's going to be a strong champion usually. So Sona is just slightly edges out Nami, but Nami I think just has a bit more utility. Sona has more scaling. It just depends on what you want. Depends on your elo bracket as well and your proficiency with the champions, but Sona's still going to be super, super strong right now. So you just want to go Airy, Mana Flow Ban, Absolute Focus, Scorch. Absolute Focus here is what you want to get most of the time because you do heal yourself in team fights and in the laning phase a lot with your W's. That means you can stay above 70% pretty comfortably most of the time, versus someone like Soraka, who's often going to dip below 70% while she's healing in team fights. And then Conditioning and Revitalize. Now, you can go Bone Plating if you're against an all-in champion in the laning phase. So if you're against like a Nautilus or a Leona, probably Bone Plating. But if you think you're going to be able to make it to 10 minutes without getting completely stomped in the lane, I recommend Conditioning. It gives you a lot of extra value with your armor and magic resist later on in the game and will protect you against threats from other lanes, right? So things like dangerous junglers. What do you got there? Oh, you're bringing me the box, Rory? Are you bringing me the box? That can be really good. And then you have to have Revitalize. She has so much healing and shielding in her kit. You know, this affects how much Aries she gives out. It affects how much Athene's healing she gives out. It affects her normal W, her E, or not her E, her W, Redemption, all of these things. So Sona's going to be fantastic. And then just Mobility Boots, and then Frostfang, Athene's, Ardent Sense, and Redemption. I probably would get these in this order. Athene's is just too strong on her not to rush. You could do Ardent if you have like 3 users that are all like doing super well in the game. But mostly Athene's, then Ardent is going to be where you want to be. Okay, let me grab this for her real quick, and I'll get right back to it. Rory, come here. You want to show me this box? Oh, are you trying to climb over? What? You want help with this box? Help, please? Okay. Oh, God. Oh, my goodness. Okay. What are those boxes, Rory? Look. Rory, look what I got. That's cat food, Rory. Look, this is people food. You want some of this? Look. Wait, what are you eating? Rory, is that the carrot? Hopefully she didn't find something really weird and random to eat. Rory, come here. Rory, look. What is in your mouth? Can I see what's in your mouth? Rory, come here. Come here. She's like, you're going to take it from me. Okay, we'll just assume it's not poison. She's not seizing out. There's nothing really that dangerous she could grab that she's eating, I don't think. She's usually pretty smart. Rory, come here. Let me just see. Come here. What do you got? She's like, you're going to take this from me. What is it, Rory? What is in your mouth? Is it just a carrot? I did give her a carrot to eat. Rory, eat this. Rory, eat this. Eat this. Yeah. You don't want it? Okay. She don't want it. Okay, anyways, moving on here. All right, Nautilus. Nautilus has been moving up a lot. I predicted this for numerous patches. Yes, he did get a couple of buffs, but he's been strong for a long time. Even before that, those buffs definitely put him over the top and helped a ton, though. If you forgot what those are, like, the big one was his stun lasts for like an extra quarter of a second early on, which is a really big deal. He can apply that to multiple targets, and he can apply it more often. I think it used to have a static 8-second cooldown, and they moved it down to like 6 or something. Thank you, Rory. Moved it down to like 6. That thing that she said she didn't want to eat, now she's eating it. And that's how it works, isn't it, Rory? You want to eat it when I don't want you to eat it. Yeah, he's super strong. He's very reliable, as I've talked about in the past. I really prefer him. People ask, why do I like Nautilus over things like Pyke, over things like Thresh? He's just more reliable. I mean, and a lot of it comes down to his ultimate. It's a point-click, 825 range. You just press R on somebody, and they're basically dead later on in the game, pretty much. And it's not just one person that it knocks up. Keep in mind that, like, it starts off at a 2-second knock-up plus stun. That goes to 2.5 seconds, and then late game, if you get to the really late game, it's a 3-second stun. And it doesn't just hit one person. If you ult the back line, anyone that it goes through is also going to get hit. So it can knock up an entire team in a team fight and hit everybody for that much. Virtually no other support is going to be able to stun people for that long. I mean, Sona can get a 1.5-second stun. This is a 3-second stun at a certain point. Yuumi, like 1.75 seconds. Okay, you want the bar? It's a fruit bar. I don't know how this one is, but you can try it out. Yeah, see what you think. Is that good? Is that yummy? Yummy, yummy? But that's the big thing. And, I've heard some other content creators say, oh, well, it's slow, but it's going to hit you. Unless you have Hourglass or something. And Ezreal is kind of moving out of the meta. People still pick him, but he's trash. So, like, things like Ezreal and Lucian, could get away from this vein also. They're not getting away, but they could put some distance and make it harder for you to follow up. A lot of them are dropping off. Now, I will say it's kind of rough against Sivir, and Sivir is very strong right now. So, like, Sivir's a very good matchup into Nautilus, because unless you break that spell shield first, unless you bait that out of her, she's going to spell shield this depth charge. So that's the one champion that's kind of rough. But then also, Tahm Kench has fallen out of the meta as support. He's doing very well top lane, but as support, he's pretty rough right now. Morgana doesn't see as much play, but she is very good into Nautilus, so just be careful blind picking Nautilus when they could do something like a Morgana. But he is very good into other tanks because, you know, he's got this reliability on his W. He just has so much CC. Like, almost everything in his kit is CC. Like, you got W, or the R, Riptide with the E, Q, his passive, and most of these can apply to multiple people. So this can knock up multiple people, slow multiple people. He can root multiple people with his passive. So he's just really, really good. Another thing that I hear no other support content creators talking about is just how valuable this hook is defensively. He's one of the only tank supports that can also escape if a situation starts going south. So if you're walking up, you're positioning like you want to make a play, and then you see the jungler like rolling up on a ward, and the enemy starts running at you, you can actually use your dredge line to like hook a tower or a wall and escape. So you can get away from stuff really reliably with Nautilus. You can also rotate around the map pretty quickly. Like, this saves you, you know, especially on your early backs before you have like any kind of boots. That can save you an additional 3 or 4 seconds to get back to lane, and that can be a lot. That ultimately means you're going to get a lot more experience a lot of times. So it's really, really handy. Yes, he can't hook over walls, but you know what? A lot of times when you're hooking over walls, unless it's with Blitzcrank, it's sketchy, right? Like, you have to jump over the wall, usually with Pyke or with Pyke or with Thresh. You have to actually go over the wall, and you're putting yourself in a really big, dangerous situation a lot of times if you do that. So yes, you can't hook over walls, but you can use it defensively. You can rotate around the map with it, and it's a huge hitbox. It is so much easier to hit this hook than a Thresh or a Pyke hook. It's got a really fat hitbox, and then also it's way faster. It's basically you instantly throw this thing out. With Thresh, you have a half-second windup. With Pyke, you have to charge up your Q, right? Like, the only other hook champion is Blitzcrank, who just kind of throws it out instantly, right? But he has so much more utility than Blitzcrank, right? He's got, you know, the AoE slow. He has this ultimate, which does a lot of CC. So it's just really, really good. And one thing that you don't see all the time, but is on the table if you have a hyper carry on your team, is you can run Font of Life and eventually get an Ardent Censer. It's like a 4th or a 5th item really late. If you're already tanky enough, if they aren't killing you, you could consider going something like an Ardent Censer. Because he does have some decent AP ratios. They're not fantastic, but they're all right. You know, if you hit him with all of your Riptide waves or whatever, you know, you can get a 0.6 here. You got a 0.9 on your Q. Your depth charge applies this. And it's just so easy to apply. You can apply it to a ton of different people. Or if they have a ton of tanks, you know, and you're super rich, you could go something like a Liandry's as well and apply some pretty decent damage that way if you think the fights are going to go long. So there are some like really fringe items that he could get. You don't want to get those things most of the time, but it is on the table sometimes if you need that. If your team needs a little bit more AP, right? If you drafted like virtually full AD, he can, and you didn't want to dodge for some reason, he can kind of do that. You don't want to go like, you know, Death Cap Liandry's Nautilus or something. But I think that sneaking in a Liandry's late game, maybe, it's rare. But Ardent Censer is a little bit more viable because he does have a self-shield that would benefit from the plus healing and shielding. He does have some AP ratios, and he can spread that so easily with Font of Life so that your entire team can benefit from Ardent. So there are some corner cases where you might want to do that. A lot of other tanks can't comfortably do that as easily. So yeah, he's just good all around, good at fighting, has good wave clear as well. That's something people don't think about a lot, but this Riptide can help you push towers, you know, rotate, pick up those scuttles, pick up the dragons. He does scuttle very well by himself as well, too, with Staggering Blow and his Riptide. He can take those pretty quickly. Not as quickly as something like a support Tahm Kench, but you can take it if your AD carry doesn't understand what you're trying to get him to do when you're trying to go take scuttle. So, you know, if your jungler is doing the standard and is hanging out top lane all game and just not even doing anything bot lane, you can take those scuttles for yourself. If you see the opportunity to push and if you have a lot of pressure in the lane, that can be a good way to get some advantages. So yeah, going to be a very strong champ right now. Aftershock, Font of Life, Conditioning, Overgrowth. You can go Bone Plating early on. Usually you can survive the laning phase with Nautilus though, so I think Conditioning is better, especially because you're going to be getting, you know, AD and armor rather and magic resist, so you get even more scaling on it. And then I think just footwear and biscuits is where I would be. You know, some people go stopwatch. I don't recommend stopwatch on most champions. I know that some people say I should get it more, that pros get it. The thing is, most people screw up stopwatch. Like, they just waste it when they're going to die anyways. And so it's a big a big waste there. And it competes with footwear. Footwear is guaranteed value. You're getting 350 gold no matter what at 12 minutes. So stopwatch, it's like, it might save you from dying. It might save you from giving the enemy 300 gold and, getting a little bit of map pressure, but it also might just be totally worthless. And you're not going to build Zhonya's with it. You're not going to build, Guardian Angel with it or anything like that. So I guess you could maybe get Gargoyle Stoneplate, but that's really pretty niche and bizarre on Nautilus. So, I think that footwear and biscuits are going to be the place to be. And then I recommend getting a defensive boot, Ninja Tabby, or Mercury Treads. You can do something like mobility boots if you're really far ahead to walk around, but he benefits so heavily from the extra armor and magic resist because of the shield that he has, and he kind of needs to be a little bit extra tanky. So that's what I recommend. And then Equinox, Zeke's, Knight's Vow, and then Locket, or you can do something kind of boutique, like an Ardent Sensor in the right circumstances. Usually Ardent, a good thing is like if you're getting into fights and getting some work done and you're not dying, then that means you can usually get an Ardent. If you're like your 80 carries really far ahead. But if you're dying, you need more tank items. Okay, so Nautilus is going to be very strong. Janna, I moved her up to tier 1. We'll see how it goes. She does have a really high win rate, so I think it's important to respect that. And I think that the meta is shifting around to be good for her. She's very good against Zac. And I think Zac might make a resurgence on this patch. They did give him some massive buffs. Now, he's kind of a weird champion. Not a lot of people play him, so there's that. But you want to consider that. But she is very good against a lot of dive champions. She's very good against tanks, and she's very good with tanks. Because, that shield scales off of armor. I've talked about that in past videos. A 300 shield, if they have 100 armor, is going to take 600 physical damage to break that shield. So the tankier the person that you're shielding, the better. She's also very good with hyper-scaling crit users. Most of the top-end champs are crit users right now, specifically Jinx and Sivir. And so when you give them more AD and they crit, they get even more value out of the AD. So her shield is way more valuable on a crit user than an on-hit user. So in a meta that's, dominated by things like Vayne, who's going to be getting Gensus, by Kai'Sa, who's going to be getting Gensus, she's okay, but she's not as strong. But if you start seeing stuff like Jinx, Sivir, Jhin, these type of champions that are going to build a ton of crit, then she gets even better. Now, the changes on her on this patch are interesting. I don't think they're going to matter that much. They might matter a little. She does get 10 extra shield, which is really nice. Early game, it's a lower cooldown on the shield, which is good for trading. And I'm going to have to test it out, but with the new changes, I believe her W, her Tornado, and her R all lower the cooldown of her shield by 20 seconds. Now, I think it's 20% of the current CD remaining on it. It's not 20% of the max possible CD, I believe. So it's not quite as good as it seems, especially if you have a lot of CDR. But it's pretty good. I think in general, most of the time, it's going to be... Rory brought that in here. Or she tried to and then yelled in the hallway, so I brought it in for her. She's trying to help. So it says it only triggers once per champion. Champion kills, Eye of the Storm. I believe. I read that somewhere. I don't remember. Oh, once per cast, yeah. 20% once per cast. So, if you tornado and knock up 3 people, or if you ult and knock away 3 people, it's not going to count. So it's only going to count once, rather. So it's really hard to get multiple procs of this. Like, usually it's just going to be 20% off. And they increased the cooldown at max level at 12 instead of 10. So, 12, you're getting, 2.2 seconds off. So you're saving, a negligible amount of CDR. So most of the time, not going to matter. Now, it does matter that all of your other CDR, if you have 40% CDR, is now based off of 12 seconds instead of 10 seconds. So I think that that's either a wash or potentially negative, that they increase the total amount by this and you get a cooldown of this. So it's okay. If you don't put a lot of points in this, if you max your W first, then your shield, like the cooldown, is going to be beneficial. But I think you should be maxing your shield. Like, you should get 3 points of W in lane for harassment and then max your shield after that. So I don't think it's going to matter that much. Now, if you hit them with multiple spells, if you hit them with a tornado or an ultimate as well, then you do get a lower cooldown on your shield. Then that does add up. That does matter quite a bit. But the thing is, and I heard Skara talking about this, he was saying, But he doesn't play Janna, so he's not going to really understand this. But he was saying, yeah, like really good, Janna players are going to be hitting with the W and the Tornado and the ult, and it's going to like create a big cooldown. The thing is, you don't want to proactively use the Tornado and the ult. Like those are reactive spells. You want to use that Tornado not just to do some extra damage and, knock somebody up for a quarter of a second. You use that to stop momentum, right? Use that to stop a Zac from jumping on you, to stop Jax from jumping on you, Jarvan, Sejuani. Like, you want to hold that and wait to stop movement with it. You don't just throw it out there randomly most of the time. So good Janna players stop movement with it and don't use it every time it's on cooldown. It's an important tool that you need to have ready to go, and you need to be paying attention and know when you should use it at the right time. So that's the skill expression in Janna, is to be able to stuff movement most of the time. Same thing with the ult. You don't just want to walk into a fight and ult immediately, right? If you use this incorrectly, it can actually save enemies. So you have to be very, very careful with how you're using this. The best way to use it, once again, is to stop movement. Rengar's trying to jump on your AD carry, knock him back with Monsoon. Zac's jumping in, knock him back with Monsoon. Lee Sin's trying to connect with his Q that he just landed, knock him back with Monsoon. So there's a lot more skill expression to Janna than people think, especially people that don't play Janna, because a lot of it is reactive. You have to understand what are the major threats that could be coming at your target, and you have to wait for them to make the move first, and then you react fast enough, and, if it's in the case of the Tornado, in the correct direction, to knock them out of that. And then that can be tricky if you're not lined up correctly positionally, right? If you are perpendicular, if you're coming in at like a T shape, right? Like Lee Sin's trying to connect in a straight line with your AD carry, but you're off to the side, you have to throw your Tornado in like this 90-degree angle and knock Lee Sin out of that. That's really hard to time correctly. So there's a lot more skill expression than Janna than meets the eye. But the main thing is it's reactive. So you're not going to proactively lower the cooldown of the shield most of the time. If it happens, it happens. If they try to jump in and your shield's on cooldown and you land that Tornado and then a W on them, great. But it's just not something you're going to be able to reliably do a lot without sacrificing a lot of the power in her kit. So basically, minor buff. I don't think it's a huge deal. It's okay. I think the bigger buff is the changing meta to where we're seeing more tanks. We're seeing the Amumu's. We're seeing the Rammuses. She's great against Rammus, by the way, because she can use either the Tornado or the Monsoon to stop him. So if he flashes your Tornado, you still have the Monsoon. So that's really good. If Zac comes back, great against Zac, great against Sejuani. A lot of these hard engaged champions she's great at, and she's great at protecting hyper-scaling AD carries like a Jinx, like a Sivir. So that's what's and crit is coming back in instead of on hit, like I said before. So that's ultimately what's buffing Janna's win rate to bring her up to one of the best ones. So yeah, this might move the needle a little bit. Maybe she gains 0.5% or something off of this. I don't think it's a huge deal though. I think the huge deal is that the meta's changing and she's very good in a traditional crit AD carry tank type of meta, which we haven't really had in a long time, both of those. But when you start to see both of those come back, that's when she's going to be strong, and that's what's happening right now. So you just want to go for Airy, Manifold Band, Transcendent, Scorch, and then Footwear and Biscuits, kind of the same as the other ones. If you're afraid you're going to get blown up by like a Zed or a Talon on the enemy team, sometimes people go Guardian. She only has one way to trigger Airy, which is her shield. Well, I guess her ult can trigger it too, but one like consistent way, which is your shield. So you're not losing as much by not taking Airy as you would off of someone like a Nami or a Sona, but Airy is still going to be extremely good on her. So you want to take Airy most of the time, but if they do have like a Zed that you're really scared of, or they have a Nautilus and you're afraid people are just going to get blown up, you could potentially take Guardian. The thing about Guardian is it protects you and someone else. So Airy can never protect you. So that's the thing. If you think you're going to get dove, if you think that they are going to focus and try to kill you and you don't have any other way to deal with it, maybe take Guardian. Yeah, if they have like Rengar, Kha'Zix, just these really heavy one-shot divers, then maybe you can do it. But the thing is, you have to put a shield on somebody else to trigger the Guardian on you, whereas if you didn't have Guardian, you could just shield yourself. So it's a little weird. I wouldn't do it most of the time. I would just stick with Airy. Or sometimes people take Comet as well for the extra lane pressure. So if you're in you have a really dominant situation in the lane, you have a Draven with you, and they have like an Ezreal or something, or they have like just this melee support that's not going to do that much most of the time, like a Tahm Kench or I don't know, something like that, then you can go Comet and really have a lot of lane oppression as well. You're sacrificing a lot of your later game scaling by taking Comet, because Airy scales extremely well with plus healing and shielding and AP, But it is pretty much guaranteed that you're going to land the comet. Did you already eat one of these, Rory?
Okay, yeah.
She says, I want more, though. These little fruit bars. You want the fruit bar, don't you, Rory? Oh, no. Rory? She smells a little stinky, dear. Oh, did you? Okay. Maybe it's just a lingering whiff. Smells a little suspect. Anyways, so pretty good. I still recommend 3 points of W for laying her ass, and then max shield after that. You really need that shield, especially the cooldown for team fights. Okay, then just mobility boots, Frostfang, Athene's, Ardent, Redemption. You can go Ardent early if your AD carries ahead. It does scale very well with her shield. You get more attacks. You have more AD on the person. Obvious synergy there. So, pretty strong champ. Moving up there. Very good at disengaging if they have a lot of tanks or a lot of divers. So, definitely consider taking her. She's one of the best peelers in the game. Very good against Nautilus for an enchanter, right? Because, yeah, they can hook you or they can ult you. But if they do that to anybody else, you're going to be able to peel them back probably. Okay, and then finally in the tier 1, Zyra. So Zyra is particularly good at gold and lower. She's still pretty good and serviceable at platinum, and maybe a little bit higher. They did nerf her plants a while back, but the meta is shifting out to be very good for her because right now, like, the nerf to Scuttle means you're a lot less likely to get ganked at level 2. It can still happen, but it's more rare. So that's going to give you more alone time. You know, at that level 2 power spike, whatever, you can just spam your plants on the enemy and really start working them down, pushing the lane in. Zyra's lanes are almost always going to push because her plants will auto-attack the minions sometimes whenever you don't hit the person with the plant. So you want to put her in a lane that pushes, and there's a lot of those lanes out there right now, like Jinx can push, Sivir can push. So it's best if they don't have an early game, like jungler, like very dangerous jungler that's going to sit there and camp you. So if they don't have something like Jarvan or Xin Zhao or whatever, that's probably good news for you. And she's pretty good against tanks later on because she does get Leandries pretty quickly and Rylai's that helps your team. Or you can get Void Staff instead of Rylai's as a second item. That adds a lot of extra damage to your team, helps out with the kiting, and usually tank comps tend to be team fight comps as well, so if you're against an enemy team that really wants to group up, you do a ton of damage off of your ult and your plants in team fights. So I think that makes her pretty well positioned in most tank metas, specifically because there's a lot of AD floating around in every lane right now. You know, outside of mid lane, there's just not a lot of AP top laners. There's not a lot of AP junglers. It's mostly fighters, so having that extra ability to run something like Zyra, that's going to be able to add a lot of extra AP to your team is good. And like I said, the fact that you can push, you can take plates very comfortably, she's really oppressive. If the jungler doesn't come down and you're a decent Zyra player, you should win every lane. Like, there are no bad matchups for Zyra in the lane. She dominates everyone from tanks to... I guess there are some. Lux is a bad matchup for Zyra, but there are not many, except for those kind of longer range mages, the Xeraths, the Lux, yeah. Xerath, Lux, things like that can be a little bit rough. But anything that's about her range or shorter, she's going to be really, really good into them. Because she doesn't use a lot of mana for these plants, and they do a lot of damage per cooldown that she does. So, and she scales really, really well with Scorch, with Comet, because each time those plants hit, it's going to reduce the cooldown on Comet. So... very, very strong champ. I recommend Comet, Mana Flow Ban, Absolute Focus, and then Scorch, just maximum harassment early on. Then I like Taste of Blood and Ghost Poro. This gives you a little bit of sustain. She does lack sustain in the lane, and then Ghost Poro is going to give you 4 to 6 AP right off the bat, and then also scales pretty well later on into the game. And it gives you that little bit of extra vision as well to help keep you safe while you're pushing in. So you just want to rush Sorcerer Boots, Frostfang, Leandries, and Rylai's. You can do Void Staff instead of Rylai's if your team already has a lot of CC, if they already have a lot of slow, or if the enemy team is stacking a lot of magic resist. So if they have like an Aatrox or a Mundo or something that has Spirit Visage early on. I guess Aatrox doesn't get Spirit Visage that often, although it is quite strong on him if your team has a lot of AP, but... anyways, it's very good. I don't recommend Morellonomicon anymore. It's okay, but they've nerfed it a lot. They took 10 AP off of, and they made it cost 100 extra gold off of the orb, Oblivion Orb. So it lost a lot of its value there. Lost, 10 AP is like 220 gold value plus the extra 100. It lost about 320 gold value off of an item that cost 1,500. So it lost like 20% of its value. It's really, really rough. And the completed Morellicon really is not that cost efficient. It's not great unless you need the healing debuff. So if you're against something like a Soraka, maybe consider going Morello, but otherwise you really, really want to get to that Liandry's. That's the most damage on a completed item. Now, yes, Haunting Guise is probably not as good as Oblivion Orb, especially in short fights and longer fights. I would argue it probably is. But the completed item, the completed Liandry's, is far stronger than the Morello. Okay, so yeah, Zyra is still going to be very strong. Best AP support. I prefer her a lot over Brand because she has much more consistent poke off of the plants in the laning phase. With Brand, you have to land really your combinations. You need to land multiple spells to kind of match the kind of poke that Zyra can put out. And her plants and her ultimate are just going to provide a lot more CC and a lot more reliability in team fights. Now, if the enemy team has a lot of melee champions that are all going to be grouping up, then yes, Brand's ult might be a little bit better, but by and large, Zyra is just more reliable. Zyra is also way better against things like Yasuo, who's very popular. Windwall can eat your ultimate if you're Brand, but it will not stop the ultimate, and it will not stop you from spawning plants as Zyra. And if you spawn melee plants, then it won't do anything to stop that damage either. If you have the range plants, Windwall can absorb some of their shots, but it won't absorb the melee shots, and it won't stop the damage from your ultimate as well. Zyra also gets free vision off of those plants, which is why I recommend maxing W second. That's going to give you a lot more vision control when you're trying to save wards so that you can put them in very specific places around things like Baron. It's going to save your life from having to face check things a lot. And it allows you to fight over control wards because the plant in the bush does not count as an actual ward, and so a control ward does not shut out vision of that plant. So it allows you to get full vision over something like a tri-bush while you're trying to clear it out so that you don't get jumped by the enemy jungler. And it's a Guardian, it makes it tough for them to come up and want to fight you too, because they're going to have to sit there. If they want to try to stop you from clearing that control ward, they're going to be eating shots off of your range plant. And if you're at the right angle where they can't see you, it's really scary for them too, because you can all in and kill them. If you hit them with an E plant plus ult ignite, they're dead. So she's really one of the bush queens. She can kill people out of bushes really easily, and she can contest vision in the bushes much better than most other supports. So that vision control is something that a lot of people really underestimate when comparing Zyra to Brand. But that's why I prefer Zyra. She's probably a little bit harder to play than Brand, but you can get used to her, and I think it's definitely a worthwhile investment. Okay, Yuumi. Everyone on the channel is going to know that I was a doubter of Yuumi, and I still stand by that position to doubt her when she very first came out. But she has received several very significant, very big buffs in a hotfix and on this patch that a lot of people aren't talking about, aren't thinking about, that are quite a big deal. And people are becoming more proficient. So we all knew everyone was eventually going to get a little bit better on her. She's a very complicated champion to play. I know there's kind of that meme going around where you just sit AFK, on your laner, but that's really not how you should be playing her. She's terrible if you do that. But if you're really active on her, she can be very strong. But she did receive several, big changes. I mean, she got, 8 buffs. 8 buffs as a hotfix here, right? So she got her stats, extra mana regen, which is big, and these are huge buffs, too. Now, with her bop and block, whenever she attacks, she gets basically 30% more mana back off of this, at least in the early levels. And the shield, 30 extra shield at level 1. It's a massive deal. That's a very, very big deal. So now she gets an 80 shield, which also has an AP ratio and is affected by plus healing and shielding. So that means that, when you pop off and you auto attack somebody, you're getting mana back, and they're just a single auto attack from them is not going to be enough. They're going to have to hit you with a skill shot or you're winning the trade. And the thing is, whenever you get that shield, you get to give it back to your AD carry. So that gives them an extra 30 shield that they keep forever. It doesn't fall off. It's not timed. So that's really, really good for early game trades. And then Prowling Projectile got a lot of extra damage as well. It got buffed up to 285 from 260. So it got more damage. It got a bigger AP ratio, 50% more AP ratio on it. The slow strength was increased at earlier levels by a lot, and the slow duration was increased by a lot. So she got 4 different buffs on her Q, which is what you max, what you spam. Got 2 buffs on her bop and block. Got a buff to her passive. And she got a buff to zoomies. So now this does way more healing. You know, it doesn't look like much. It's like, okay, who cares? It's 10 healing. Remember, you can cast this twice in sequential order. So it's really 20 more healing, which is a big deal. And her final chapter does an additional, each extra wave does an additional 25% damage. So she's basically getting, 25% extra damage on her ult. She's getting, a lot of extra healing. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like 9 buffs on one patch. So that is significant. So people that are going to be like, I told you she was OP on release. It's like, no, bro, she got really, really big buffs. She was bad. People didn't know what to do with her. She had a 30% win rate for a reason, for the first couple of weeks on release. But now that, she had all of these buffs and people are learning her, she's moving up. She's 45%. But the thing is, she's really, really hard to play. Like, really hard to play. So I don't think she's ever going to be a champion that's more than like a 49 or 50% win rate. She's like a Rakan, right? Like, Rakan's floating around 51 right now. But it's like Rakan and Thresh. Most of the time, if they're healthy in a meta, they're about 50%. They're never going to be like 55% win rate champs in solo queue just because they're too difficult to play. But then recently on this patch, she also got some buffs, and a lot of people aren't really appreciating just how big some of these are. So, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so the biggest thing here that you need to know is that Ahri, when she jumps to different allies, it was not giving Ahri to them. That is a very, very big deal. Late game, Ahri shield can max out at an 80 with a 0.4 ratio on it, right? And she gets a lot of AP because of her W and her build. She's going to have a lot of AP, so she's probably going to have about like 200 AP. So basically, that shield that you can give off late game with Ahri is probably going to be like between 150 to 200 shield. And it scales with plus healing and shielding and revitalize if you choose to take that. So it could be even bigger than that. But it was not triggering. When you jumped around to different allies in a fight, they were not getting Ahri. So basically, they were not getting an extra 150 to 200 shield whenever you jumped. And you can trigger this all the time because your W has no cooldown. I think there's a very minor cooldown of like a quarter of a second or something like that on her W, but it might even be a half a second, but you can very comfortably zip back and forth between each other. And Ahri doesn't go anywhere whenever you do that. It stays basically on you because you're attaching to them. So what does this mean? This means that Ahri basically is always up on you and always available. So in a team fight, you can jump around over and over and over again and give people Ahri. So that's a free like 150 to 200 shield that you can apply 5, 6, 7 times in a fight easily, just bouncing back and forth between people. That is massive. That is a huge, huge deal that this was not triggering. Like, nobody's talking about this in the patch notes, but that is a massive, massive deal. That's going to tremendously buff her team fighting because, once again, Ahri, like, the cooldown on Ahri usually is you apply it to somebody else with a shield, right? And then it lingers there for a couple of seconds, and then it has to float back and land on you. So, for most people, even later on in the game, it's like maybe a 4-second cooldown on Ahri, right? But for her, because you're already attached, because you're already right there all the time when you're jumping, it's really just going to be like a 2-second cooldown on it. So, very, very powerful. She can jump back and forth. There was a bug with approach velocity, so they fixed that. I don't think a lot of people are even abusing that. But another thing now, gives assists on champion takedowns when she attaches to a participating ally. So now, I guess beforehand, this was bugged or something because maybe you had to actually hit them with a Q or auto attack them or something like that. But that, it's a lot less likely that's going to happen, in a big team fight. There will be some people that die that you did not auto attack, that you did not hit with a Q. But now you just jump to anybody and you get free assists. So now in team fights, every team fight you're probably going to get, in a big team fight, 1 or 2 extra assists. That adds up. Over the course of a game, 5 or 6 more assists, that's an extra at least 1,000 gold a lot of times. It depends on what's going on, but 500 to 1,000 gold depending on how optimistic you want to be about this. But that's a really, really good amount of extra gold that you can get. So that's a big deal as well. So she's going to be getting extra gold. She's going to be giving out just a freaking insane amount of healing and shielding off of Aerie. And don't forget, when Aerie shields, it also applies stacks from your Athenes to heal the person as well. So, and that also scales with plus healing and shielding and revitalize. So all of these just chain together so much to make her so much more powerful off of these patch notes with these two things right here. It's a very, very big deal. And they did whatever this is to Yuumi. I've talked in the past about why I hate speed decay because it doesn't have an actual number on it. We don't know what it means. But it sounds like flattened the movement speed decay. So when she has more ability power, it decays slower. So basically, they move a little bit faster, I believe. I believe that's a buff. Although how much, who knows. But these two right here are just astronomically high buffs. So I think she's very good right now. I really do. Now that people are figuring out the builds on her, I mean, she could easily be tier 1. But the thing with a lot of these tiers here is that these three in particular are very skill expressive. You have to be good on these champions, but if you are good, these three could definitely slide into tier 1 over something like a Janna or a Zyra, depending on your elo bracket and depending on how good you are on these three champions, the Yuumi, Rakan, and Lux. They could be really good. So the thing about Yuumi is she has pretty consistent poke. Once you practice with her, you should be able to hit a high percentage of these prowling projectiles. I mean, it's a heat-seeking missile, basically, or it's a homing missile. You control it, but you can zip around the minion wave. It's very, very difficult for the enemy to dodge this, and it's got a pretty good range on it. So unless your AD carry is like AFK really far behind the minions, you should be in range to poke people with this consistently. Bop and block, when you pop off auto attack, we already talked about that, gives you a pretty sizable shield, scales really well later on into the game. I mean, level 11, that's a 200 base shield that scales with plus healing and shielding and AP. So it's really going to be like a 300 shield that's going to be on like a 13-second cooldown. Hey, thanks for the sub, DM. I appreciate it. But yeah, I think this is, it's really strong. It's great harassment. It's an awesome slow, and 80% slow for 2 seconds. Yes, it decays, but my God, that is really, really slow. So that's going to make it easy for your enemy team to hit a bunch of their skill shots. You know, you land this, the Lux mid lane is going to be able to hit her bind, or, you know, your Jin's going to be able to hit his W. Like, there are a lot of good combinations. Isn't that right, Rory? What is it? You want some of this? Well, you wanted to go to the store, dear. Okay. All right, so you and me here gives out a pretty good amount of adaptive force. Now, I think that if someone's really fed, you should get multiple points in this instead of zoomies, but you definitely max your Q first. It kind of depends on the situation. I think that maybe just 2 or 3 points in zoomies and then max this late game, but you kind of have to feel it out. Most people max zoomies after the Q and they just get 1 point in this, which means this adaptive force really doesn't matter that much. Like, you're going to get an extra 10 AP, which is nice. They might get an extra 10 AP or AD or something. But it's not going to matter that much unless you get a bunch of points in it. But overall, still going to be a really strong champion. This heal adds up to, if you use both charges of this, it can get up to a 280 heal with a 0.8 ratio on it. That has really good plus healing and shielding. What is it, Ronnie? You trying to get up? Okay. Okay, you hanging out? So, yeah, I think that can be potentially really good. And then that final chapter is a great amount of CC. It's a 1.75 second root, which is really important. And it's on a pretty low cooldown. So I think that it's pretty good. And don't forget, you can detach, you can zip around. Now, one of the hard things about Zoomy in team fights is you need to figure out who you jump onto with your W. So if they're out of range, you will actually jump off, which can be very disorienting and confusing. That's happened to me several times playing her, where I'm trying to jump to somebody who just like barely gets out of range, or they like dash out of range right before I get on them with a W. And then when you drop off, you're vulnerable. So I've had some fights where, you know, there's a bunch of stuff going on. I'm trying to jump over to save, you know, the Ezreal that's about to die or whatever, to give him a heal, and then he like ease away, and then all of a sudden I get hit with a piece of CC because I just jumped off of my current target and I get blown up. So it takes a lot of practice to understand the ranges on the W, to make sure you don't accidentally jump off when you're just trying to trade people and just zip around to the people that you're attached to. So it takes a lot of practice to get her right. There's so many different options and things that you can do. You know, you can W onto certain people and use your Q to slow people down. You can obviously W onto people to apply zoomies to apply the heal. You can apply 2 heals to the same person, or you can jump around and apply them to 2 different people. You can try to use your final chapter to align correctly so that you're hitting the right people. You might have to jump off to move a little bit just in case they flash so that you can stay on them so they get the stun. Then you try to auto attack to get your bop and block shield, and then you have to figure out who do you want to give that shield to, and then W to jump back onto that person you're giving the shield to. And you want to constantly, whenever possible, be jumping back and forth between different people, so you're giving the Aerie shield to as many different people as you can. So it gets pretty nutty, pretty crazy, and there's an insanely high skill ceiling trying to do all of this. It's like juggling like 4 different abilities and trying to figure out what you're supposed to be doing. 4 abilities with a passive, with, like all kinds of interactions with Athene's, Aerie, all kinds of crazy stuff. So really, really hard to play at a very high level, but when you do, she can be very, very strong, and she synergizes really well with a lot of different items out there. Now, the runes on her are definitely up for debate. I think that there's a lot of people that have not really mastered or have not really sort of finalized what she should be getting. As you can see, there's a lot of different stuff. I think most people take Aerie, especially after this Aerie buff, where they changed the glitch on it. I think you have to go Aerie. It's just OP. It's just ridiculous late game, being able to zip around and apply it to everybody like that. Now, the secondaries get a bit more interesting. I think most people have it narrowed down. There's 3 different things in the running, which is to say almost everything. There's Precision, there's Resolve, and then there's Inspiration. So the easiest one to understand is probably Resolve. You can go Font of Life. You apply a slow pretty easily with your Q. That allows you to apply Ardent Sensor to a lot more people, so that's really handy. And then Revitalize scaled super well. You have so many different heals and shields going on. You're getting Athene's. You're taking Aerie. So Revitalize is going to be extremely powerful on her. So that's easy to understand. The kind of weird one is Precision. And this is something that's been gaining a lot of popularity with a lot of people out here. So the main reason you take this is Cut Down. Yuumi has extremely low base HP, and this is usually seen as a detriment. And it is a lot of times. They want you to be punished really hard whenever you get caught out. When you're not attached to somebody. That's supposed to balance out the fact that you're untargetable a lot of the time. But Cut Down increases your damage by a lot. So very often, this is going to give you 10 to 15% more damage permanently. And that damage gives you a lot of extra pressure in the laning phase with your Q. It gives you a lot of damage later on, and that damage later on, don't forget, transitions into extra healing because all of your damage, 1/3 of that is going to go towards healing with your Athene's Unholy Grail. So it's very good in the laning phase, and it's even pretty good later on for doing that extra damage, but also increasing your healing output. So very strong. And then Presence of Mind, getting that 10% cooldown on your ultimate is very nice. You do have a super high impact ultimate that's great to chain together with other hard engaged champions. So you have a lot of potential there with that ultimate. And that mana regen is actually pretty relevant as well. If you're going around spamming zoomies and spamming your Q, you can go out of mana in fights because she doesn't have very high base mana regen. It's okay, but mostly you're getting this for the cut down. So that's something that's interesting. If you're going for this build, you probably want to go for Comet, Absolute Focus, and Scorch. That does just the maximum amount of damage you can possibly do. So you'll see that combination a lot. Sometimes people go Aerie with that, which is kind of splitting it. You do some damage with Aerie, but not as much as Comet. But you scale a little bit better later on. Comet's very good on her too because your Q slows, so it pretty much guarantees you're going to land the Comet. So that's a really popular build that not everybody's doing that, but a lot of people are doing that. It probably depends on your lane matchup. And if you have someone early game that can complement that kind of harass that you're throwing down. But that can be really strong. And then Inspiration is just kind of your standard. He was abusing Approach Velocity before they just fixed that on this patch, I think. Or maybe he didn't get the memo that they fixed that. But you could just go kind of your standard sort of boots, Cosmic Insight. Cosmic is really good because you have 2 offensive summoners that you can use proactively to make plays. You don't have to wait on flash, and these are lower cooldown. So getting that extra 5% CDR is very relevant. And if you get these boots, you can turn them into Ionian boots, which same deal, 10% cooldown on your summoners. Very strong, especially if you take things like Ignite plus Exhaust. You can really do a lot of damage there. So it just kind of depends on what you want to do. Some people won't go boots at all on Yuumi, but Ionians are very, very nice. And keep in mind, you're not always attached. Sometimes you have to go like roam. Sometimes you have to take a back when your AD carry is not backing, so then you have to run back to lane manually. So there are times when you're not attached, when you do need to move around the map. So boots can be useful. They aren't a complete waste. But if you are really far ahead, you do have the option of skipping boots or just staying on brown boots, saving money, getting to bigger items, getting to your Athenes, getting to your Ardent Censer faster. So I think most of the time I would probably go Airy, Mana Flow, Transcendent Scorch, and then Presence of Mind and Cut Down. One other one that I'll mention here is Ghost Poro plus something like Taste of Blood in the laning phase can give you better trading potential. And then Ghost Poro, because you get all that extra AP, she scales really well with AP herself, but she also hands some of that off with her W. So I think that is another option that you could do. And as far as items, you definitely want to go Athenes first. After that, you have a couple of options. Some people like to go Mage Eyes if you think you're going to be able to go really safe. I know, honey, this is important. Done in a second. They'll be fine. And then Ardent Censer, if you do have someone who benefits very heavily, or even a couple of people that benefit from Ardent Censer, that can be really good if your AD carry is not super far behind. And then Redemption is something helpful as well. You can use that while you're attached. Some people get twin shadows, which can be very good. That can make it safe when you're trying to go ward. It can help you track people down to make plays. So that is handy. Pretty much everybody goes Athenes, though. Almost everybody goes Ardent Censer, and then after that, it's kind of up to you. If you're ahead, you can do the Mage Eyes thing. Some people even go Death Cap if they're super far ahead, and the game's going really late. But overall, she's going to be very strong, but you need to practice her a lot. And we're just about out of time. The last couple ones I've talked about a lot and the video last time, so go check that out if you want to see more of that. I just don't want this video to go too long, but Rakan, I think he is making a comeback. His win rate has gone up quite a bit. He's around 51.5% right now as of the making of this video. The extra stats early on help out a ton. We are seeing some assassins start to reemerge in the jungle, which is kind of weird because tanks are emerging too, but you know, Kayn is super popular right now as an example of someone who gets played a lot. And Rakan is really good against that kind of stuff because Guardian protects him and protects the user, and he can double shield people. And he can also take things like Zeke's pretty comfortably to give him some extra armor and magic resist. He can take things like Mercury Treads and Ninja Tabby. So he's like an enchanter that has the scaling of enchanters. He can get enchanter-like items to help his AD carry. Like he can get Ardent Censer. It is very good on him. But also if they have those types of assassins, he can get resistances and still be very useful with a lot of CC, good engage, and pretty good healing and shielding. So pretty good all-arounder. His laning phase is a bit weaker. He can get outscaled by some of these champions like Sona, Yuumi, Janna. But he does have that engage, especially if your team doesn't have any. He can be really good with that. Lux is still going to be strong. I've moved her down just a little bit. It feels like people are figuring out how to counter her a little bit more. You aren't seeing as many mages in the bot lane. At least I haven't been seeing them in high plat and diamond. But she is still good. You know, if you land your Q, it's a 2-second bind. That helps out a lot. Your shield scales really well later on into the game. You have great vision control with your E, kind of like Zyra. You have really good wave clear with your E. You have lots of flexibility. Most people are going Aftershock. You know, I had a debate on stream. I don't remember. Sometime earlier this week, everyone's like, why don't you go full AP Lux? That's what everyone's doing. It's like, no, that's what nobody's doing. Okay? Everybody goes Aftershock. There's a couple of people sometimes, occasionally, will go Comet. But by and large, it's Aftershock. And the reason that you do this is it just makes you a lot safer against all-in champions because that's the weakness to Lux. If you get all-in, you're probably going to die. But if you bind somebody with your Q, you get that Aftershock. That's going to buy you enough time, not only for your first shield to go off, but probably for your second shield to come back and give you that double shield. So buying that extra time is super valuable on Lux because if you can just survive for that first 2 seconds for your second shield to come back, usually you can get out. So I think that's really handy. More and more people are taking things like Cheap Shot and Relentless Hunter to help you zip around the map a little bit faster and to apply a bit more pressure with Cheap Shot, which kind of makes up for the fact that you don't have Comet. It's not quite the same, but at least it's some little bit of extra poke. So that's been a very common build so far on her. But yeah, I mean, pretty decent. She's got some long-range engage poke. She's got an AoE shield that can hit a lot of people in team fights. She, of course, has her ultimate, which is great for wave clear, great for AoE damage. So she's got a lot of utility to her. She is one of the better AP mages. I think she's harder to play than Zyra, does less damage, less all-in later on, but also scales better, particularly if you're behind because you are still an enchanter. And definitely go for the Athenes build. Once again, you know, you're not seeing a lot of Tear of the Goddesses here, right? You're not seeing Archangels. You're not seeing Death Caps. You're not seeing Lich Banes here, okay? Everybody that's playing this at a high level is getting things like Ardent Censer, like Athene's Unholy Grail, like, Redemption. All of those are going to be way more popular because they're more cost efficient, like I talked about earlier. So please, don't go Lich Bane. Don't go Seraphs. You can do it if you want. It's your elo, but this is what most people are doing for the reasons that I described before. Okay, final couple of ones we'll talk about. We've got Soraka here. Soraka did get some buffs recently. She did get some extra movement speed off of her Q, although that did hurt her laning phase a little bit. She does less damage off her Q, but it heals more, so it makes her better later on in the game, makes her a bit safer with her move speed. But overall, her win rate has gone down just a little bit, not much, like maybe 1% off of that. But if you are still very good on Soraka, she can work. She does have lots of harassment with her Q. If you have a lot of tanks, kind of like with Janna, it's very nice. If you have a front line that can protect you, you do excellent healing. Problem with Soraka is Grievous Wounds just completely butcher her. She can heal through them, but she doesn't have anything else she can do. Things like Sona, she's got a shield attached to her W, so Grievous Wounds still pretty good, but not as devastating, right? Nami, yes, it hurts her heal, but she still has a lot of CC. Yuumi, yes, it hurts her heal, but she still has a lot of shielding. She has a lot of CC. She has a lot of other utility. Soraka is basically all healing. You do have a silence that can be good in some clutch moments, but her CC is very, very lackluster compared to a lot of the other top-level enchanters. So, same thing with Janna. Like, yes, you are cutting her shielding, but she does have her, or you are cutting her healing with Grievous, but she does have the shielding. So, Soraka is just disproportionately really destroyed by Grievous Wounds, which are very popular still. So, she's all right. If you really love Soraka, you can make her work. It is a good meta, especially if you have tanks that can help protect you, or if you're against something like a Yuumi or a Sona or a Janna, something that's going to be kind of passive in the laning phase, which those are all very popular right now. Then she can perform very well. But be careful against those all-in champs. Be careful if they have something like Nautilus specifically, but also things like Leona. That can get very scary very quickly. Zyra. And then finally, Pyke. Pyke can be very good if you're landing the hooks. If you're snowballing really hard, he's excellent. But if you aren't snowballing, he's kind of worthless. He has to build damage items. He can get extra gold by ulting to finish people off. But if people aren't dying, he's not getting gold. And if he's not getting gold, he's falling behind because most of his items are 2,900 gold. Most of the other support items are somewhere between 2,100 to 2,300. So he's okay. He has a much lower win rate than a lot of other champions. He has less CC. He has less utility overall. It is very nice that he can go invisible. He can roam. He can ward very well. So if you are very proficient on him, you can definitely make him work. He can definitely be a total menace. But for the average people that just have an average amount of games on him, he's just not putting up the numbers. So win rates aren't everything. Obviously, I have Yuumi a lot higher than her win rate would suggest. I have Rakan a little bit higher than his win rate would probably suggest. But overall, he's okay. I would just rather play Nautilus, but I think he's the second best hook champ on this patch. And then the final sort of honorary mentions here. Leona can be good if Nautilus is banned and you need hard engage, especially against immobile champions like Jinx. Leona can fit the bill. She's a little bit more dangerous, has a little bit less utility than Nautilus does, but she can still work very well, does a lot of damage early on. Thresh has a ton of utility. He just doesn't have the damage. Early on, yeah, like level 2, level 3, lots of damage on your auto attacks. With your empowered flays, right? But after that, after the early game, his damage falls off quite a bit. There's a lot of counterplay to his kit. Everybody, has played against many Threshes in their lifetime. So he can work, but you have to be extremely good. There's no such thing as an average Thresh. Either you take over the game or you're worthless. His base stats are really low. He doesn't scale very well, but those hooks are great. The Lantern's great if your team clicks it. So he does have a lot of utility. Flay is very good against things like Zac or Lee Sin, those type of champions that want to hard engage, but by and large, he's got a really, really high skill ceiling, or like skill floor there. You have to be like very proficient on him for him to even be decent. Finally, Lulu, I dropped a lot. I just don't win with her. It seems like a lot of other people don't either. She feels good when she is really good, but the problem is like her E and her Q just really don't do that much. E is a very anemic shield after the nerf. The Q does have some wave clear and a little bit of damage early on, but falls off pretty hard later. W is excellent. Like the polymorph, the speed up, the extra attack speed is great, but the problem is you only get to choose one of those modes. So that sucks to an extent. If you're polymorphing the enemy, you're not giving any buffs to your ally. If you're giving buffs to your ally, then you don't have any CC. So it's just kind of awkward in a lot of situations. Your ultimate is very good on a low cooldown, so that's great. Just she's basically playing with 2 abilities. So she's all right. She's very good if your AD carry is really fed and you don't need to polymorph anybody. She gives huge buffs, probably some of the best buffs in the game. But overall, she's got some problems. And then Morgana, she's all right as a counter pick, but I wouldn't blind pick her. She can have a problem against a lot of other heavy AD champs that are out there. She can still work, though. Braum, good if you have Lucian. Good if you're a team fighter. Like a team fight comp can be pretty good. Good if you're a challenger and you're in a super low gold economy. But overall, I just don't think he scales enough, and he requires a bit too much team coordination. I know it sounds ironic when I've got something like Yuumi up there, but Yuumi scales so hard. Sona scales so hard. Braum has 0 scaling in his kit. He gets like some extra damage on his Q based on his max health, but it's virtually nothing. So it's just his scaling is really bad. So you need to close out games quickly, or you need to be in an environment where people just aren't going to get a lot of kills, where the gold economy is really low, like a pro game, like a challenger game, where the final score might be 10-10 or something instead of 50-50 like you might find in a bronze game. Anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much for watching. As always, I really appreciate it. Hopefully this helps you out. There was a lot of movement here. I think there are a lot of really viable champions, honestly. I think that if you're proficient on any of these top 10 champions, I think that they can be very good. I think there's a lot of diverse champions that are strong right now. So this has been one of the most diverse metas in quite a long time, I think. I think that finally some engaged tanks are pretty good again, like your Nautilus, like your Pyke, like your Leona. You still got AP champs that are strong, like your Zyra, like your Lux. And then you've got a variety of different kinds of enchanters that are good. It's not just the Sona Nami. Those are still there. But Janna's starting to come back as a Supreme Peeler. Yuumi is kind of this really high skill cap enchanter. Same thing with Rakan. It has a lot of different options. It's very modular. It's very high skill expression for an enchanter. So there's a lot of really good stuff out there for everybody. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it. And I'll see you next time. Have a great day.